Hello everybody, welcome to another installment in my mini-series about unusual, interesting or iconic engines. Today is another Audi lump, the V8. A few years ago, Audi made the statement that the current 4-litre TFSI unit used in many of their vehicles was likely to be their last. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to go back into their history and look at one of their firsts. And while I was doing my research, I discovered some very interesting things. So, let's go.
Let's go!
Audi were very late to the V8 party, introducing their first only in 1988 in the inventively titled Audi V8, a full-size luxury car and the predecessor of the A8. Now, that car had the engine available in two configurations, 3.6 or 4.2 litres. It was a very modern unit, all aluminium with double overhead cams with 4 valves per cylinder. With the introduction of the D2 generation A8, the first car to bear that nameplate, Audi brought out a very special version of that 4.2 litre engine. It had a 5 valve per cylinder head, 3 inlet and 2 exhaust. In the mid-90s that seemed to be quite in vogue because Ferrari were also doing the same thing when the 348 became the 355. Now, the S8 that had that engine was an absolute masterpiece. It had the same aluminium chassis that the A8 had, a revolutionary feature at the time, and a 340 horsepower engine that, although it was right at the front of the car in Audi tradition, was absolutely gorgeous. Now, that car is perhaps best known for being featured in the amazing film Ronin, and I got to review one of those cars a few months ago, courtesy of Audi UK. If you want to see more about that, check out my review on that particular car. Audi kept the 40 valve layout for a good number of years, and different versions of that engine saw service in the A8, the A6, S6, the S4, and ultimately this, the RS6. At the time of this car's production, Audi owned a small British engineering outfit by the name of Cosworth. They actually built the 2.7 litre V6 that went into the C5 RS6, and they put them to work developing this. This car has a version of the 5 valve per cylinder V8, but with reworked heads and, more importantly, 2 turbochargers, 2 side mount intercoolers, and therefore 444 horsepower and about 560 newton meters of torque, or 413 pound-foot. Except this one doesn't. This is a plus. It has a revised ECU and the extra cooling from the hot market version of this car, meaning this doesn't have 444 horsepower, it's got 480. At the time, if you wanted another practical car with this amount of power, your only alternative was a Mercedes. The BMW M5 of the time had really just been discontinued and was available then exclusively as a saloon with a measly 400 horsepower. It wasn't until the V10 M5 that BMW had not just an engine with the power to take this on, but also a touring version too. In many ways, for me, this car is the spiritual successor to the Lotus Carlton. You can fit the family, the dog, some luggage, and keep a Ferrari honest in a straight line, all at the same time. A reasonably firm sport suspension also means the car will go around a corner, although that's not really its natural thing. Of course, you also have Audi's customary Quattro 4-wheel drive, and these cars also gained a reputation as being a bit of a tuner's darling. 10 years ago, every time I saw one of these, I guarantee you the power figure would start with at least a 6. And while the engines would certainly take it, the gearboxes really didn't. Jag used the exact same auto box in some of their cars of the period, and I've seen a few people that worked there claiming that the 400 horsepower that they put through it, they already felt was probably at the limit of what the box could take. So if you do see one of these running big power, Ask how many gearboxes it's had, because I doubt it's on its first. What is very interesting is that I previously thought there were 3 distinct generations of Audi V8. The original generation, which essentially ended with this car and was replaced with the FSI, direct injection 4.2s, as used here in the B7 RS4, and the final generation being the current 4-litre turbo direct injections. However, when I looked a little bit closer, I've become convinced that they are all in fact different versions of the exact same engine. Of course, there will have been changes, particularly in the heads, but every single Audi V8 ever produced shares the same bore spacing and bore size, and for the most part, capacity too. They are all in fact very close relatives, and that is extremely cool because that means that to date, that Audi V8 still has a living relative 32 years later. The B7 RS4's 4.2 litre V8 is one of my favourite Audi engines. It is an absolute masterpiece, and in my opinion, every bit a match for the engines that BMW were producing at the same time. It's made all the more remarkable when you think that it was developed from a fairly old engine that was never designed to rev this high. In fact, the early versions of this engine were known internally at Audi as the high revs concept, and these birthed the V10 that we know and love in the R8 today. In fact, so versatile is this V8 platform that not only has it birthed the current 4-litre turbo petrol, the 4-litre turbo diesel, as in the SQ7, also shares many of the same parts, and that is frankly remarkable. However, it would be very remiss of me not to mention the other VW 8-cylinder, the W8. Now, while these are brilliant engines and special in their own right, the W8 falls straight into that category of really weird. A lot of people see Volkswagen AG as a very staid, sensible and safe company, but it takes a genuine madness to develop a W8, a true freak of an engine, and then to go and put it in just one car, a Passat. That is a totally nonsensical thing. I am so glad that they did it, and I'm also slightly upset that VW don't have one in their heritage fleet. So I unfortunately can't really tell you much more about that engine today. But if anybody watching does have one of those, I really would love a go if you'd be so kind as to let me. However, I hope you've enjoyed this little look at the history of the Audi V8. And I don't know about you, but I came here with simply a passing interest in them, and I left with the greatest of respect. And I'm so glad that I did look into this because, well, until I did my research, I really never would have known just how connected these power plants all were. And so thank you for taking your time to watch. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.